Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today I'll talk about my Lightning Beam build for the new Torchlight season with Frostbitten Gemma. So a couple of days ago, Torchlight Infinite's Twin Nightmare season has started. This is basically a new economy, fresh start, and this time there was a new hero, which I wasn't really too interested in because it's kind of a sword and board class. But what I was very much interested in is one of the reworks of an old class, old quote-unquote, which is the Frost version of Gemma. The hero was in kind of a weird place, and now they made it a lot more streamlined and a lot more focused on actually freezing enemies. And along the way of getting good freeze uptime, they also give you very good incentives to do so with a ton of more multipliers while enemies are frozen. So it's an extremely high damage class that on top also has good defensive mechanisms because it innately freezes. And as for skill choice, the obvious one would be Ring of Ice. However, I wanted to try out a new skill. Ring of Ice, totally fine. We're going to talk about it later as well. But I wanted to try a new skill, which is Lightning Beam. And the reason I wanted to try it is because it is extremely high damage, which can make up for worse gear. The playstyle is basically you press a Lightning Beam, and after 5 casts, you get this small thing that's kind of like a brand from PoE following you around and beaming enemies. And it has been a blast so far. We're converting the lightning damage to cold, obviously, so it can actually freeze. And overall, I think it's a really good fit, but you can kind of play all cold or lightning skills that you want, so you can try it out yourself. But with this shell that I made, I don't have all that much invested. I bought one very expensive memory that we're going to talk about later. But just to be clear, this is a league start viable build because I literally played it from day one on. Alright, so before anything, I'll show you a skill on the dummy right here. So this is basically what you're going to do. These little beams on the ground that you see actually zap out enemies. And as you can see right here, I have round about 2 billion-ish damage when everything's up. Really depends. The dummy sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But yeah, let's say 1.7 billion with pretty crappy gear. So it is a high damage skill. But to get this amount of damage, there's obviously a lot of intricate things going on right here. The first thing we're going to talk about is our main skill, Lightning Beam. Now, Lightning Beam on its own is a pretty low damage skill, right? At first glance. If you want to compare it to something, Ring of Ice is kind of the standard of cold casters. That would be a little bit less than a third of the damage of a Ring of Ice. However, what it says here is every 5 times the skill is cast, generate a thunderbolt around you that follows the caster. And you might think 5 times sounds really annoying, but what you have to understand is it actually works with spell burst. So as long as you have a certain amount of maximum spell bursts, you press the button once and you have this fella following you around, right? And this can stack up to, for me, 7 times. Now, how often can we have this up? So it tells you 3 times. However, if you go to expand, it will tell you for every +1 beam, increases the thunderbolt upper limit by +1. So these little buggers usually can only have 3, as you can see right here. But since I have +2 beams from both my support and one of my items, which is my belt right here, I can actually get up to 7. Now we have to convert this skill to cold, which if you're Ring of Ice, you don't have to do that, but with this, you have to. And the only way to do that is the Frozen Lightning Ring. This one literally costs nothing. However, if you want this, I think it costs like 60 FE or 70 FE right now. So if you have a tier 0, it actually converts 100%. Otherwise, it only converts 50. If you only have a normal one, you can also replace one of these support, most likely Overload, with the cold, lightning to cold support right here, then this converts the other 50%. However, I want to make clear that I basically played this because it's one of the new skills. It doesn't mean that you have to if you don't like it. Every cold and lightning skill goes. If you have a lightning skill, you have to convert it. If you're cold, you're good to go anyways. If you're Ring of Ice, you're pretty much on the safe side right here. So this is Ring of Ice. It's incredibly strong. But if you use other skills, your results may vary. But now let's go over the hero and the rework. So what happens with Frostbitten Gemma is she revolves around having cold energy, having a cold pulse that gets released. This is this kind of thing that you see periodically around me right here. And whenever that happens, an enemy gets frostbite stacks. Now, how does freeze actually work? So all you have to understand about freeze is when an enemy gets 100 frostbite stacks, it is frozen, considered frozen. Then it removes 100 frostbite. Now, this is actually doable in this game because there's nothing that's really immune to freeze. Even if enemies don't get affected by freeze, they still are technically frozen, so all your more multipliers apply. Against bosses, however, this has to be balanced because, I mean, you know what freeze means, right? They're just locked in place. They're iced up, right? But against bosses, that would be completely OP. So what happens against them is the freeze roots them, so they can't move, and they deal 20% less damage. And this less damage here actually scales with freeze effect. But with that knowledge, back to the hero trait. So we get cold energy, 1 cold energy upon casting a cold skill. If you're Ring of Ice, pretty self-explanatory. If you are, however, lightning-based, what you need is one of these memories right here. They cost like 4 or 5 FE right now. And what they do is basically the TLDR of this is it has to be in your second slot, otherwise it doesn't work. It says Engram 2 exclusive, and it basically lets you get away with being a non-cold skill. That is all it does. It gives you a tiny bit of extra damage, which is nice as well. But yeah, that's all you really have to know. So if you are lightning based, that is a memory that you need to use. And however you get that energy, whenever Cold Pulse consumes these charges, you get a powerful buff for a little bit. And that is right here. As it says, 6% additional cold damage for 4 seconds per cold energy consumed, and we're going to have up to 10, so that is a lot of extra damage. And basically, that cold energy gets consumed by you triggering the Cold Pulse. And the reason this Cold Pulse is really nice because it will actually apply a ton of Frostbitten stacks, more on that in a second. So as you can already see, the first trait right here just enhances our Cold Pulse even more. It gives you extra freeze effect on targeted enemies, and so basically, your freeze gains an effect where enemies take more damage while they're frozen, and this also scales with freeze effect. Then on the second one, we're taking Snowy Embrace, which gives us more maximum cold energy, so more damage, and also restores a cold energy every second, which is nice to have, but it's not really necessary. The bottom one is just absolutely, like, really bad. Eliminates, so basically it's like Culling Strike from PoE for 50% enemies. It sounds good, but non-elite enemies, I mean, you really don't need this. It's complete overkill. This needs to be reworked ASAP. It is completely worthless. Then the level 50 trade is just a lot of power creep here. 50% additional freeze duration upon freezing an enemy for the first time, which means while mapping, it's just glorious. And then also 40% freeze effect, which gives you even more damage because remember, your freeze effect doesn't just reduce damage from enemies and stuff, it also gives you more damage. And then we have 2 harsh decisions to make. The first one is between 2 absolute powerhouses at level 62. Frostides inflicts 100 additional frostbite rating when an enemy is hit by Cold Pulse for the first time. That means Cold Pulse immediately freezes the enemy every single time. And also, this reduces the interval. So usually, as we saw, Cold Pulse has an interval of 4 seconds. With this, it does not anymore. It's incredible. You cannot not use this while mapping. It's insane. The difference is, I mean, it's crazy. And then we have Frigid Infusion right here. So Frostbite and Frostbite rating will continue to be inflicted on frozen enemies. Without going too much into detail, this is completely busted because there's certain effects that give you extra damage per Frostbite on enemy. So if it doesn't remove it down to 0, that is insane. But also, whenever the freeze ends, 25% of your Frostbite rating will be retained. And if you don't know, Frostbite can go over 100, up to like 300. So that is how you get there. This one against single target is busted, and you should be swapping whenever you have a big boss fight. This is your go-to for mapping. Whenever you just bossed and you forgot to switch back, you will immediately notice. And then the last trait, I would say Blooming Frost Flower. Always, always, always do this one first. The reason I'm not doing it is because I have this absurdly expensive hero memory. Basically, you will see my gear is very scuffed. I farmed this up. It's like 2,000 FE right now, and it was worth it because it is very strong. You can have both of these, but this is a novelty purchase. You should always have Blooming Frost Flower. Now, what this does is whenever you inflict a freeze, you get another Cold Pulse. Another Cold Pulse, which inflicts even more Frostbite, right? And it only has an interval of 0.1 seconds. So basically with this, I'll show you a map in a second, everything will just chain explode. It is glorious. Also, each time an enemy is hit by a Frost Pulse recently, you get 12% more damage on top. So that is nice as well. And this stacks up to 5 times, so up to 60% more damage. This one here is what you swap to for single target. I don't have to, which means I have a little bit more damage while mapping. But all you do if you don't have this memory, which you probably won't, is just swap. Swap these two. Go to Frigid Infusion, go to Born Piercing Frost against bosses. That is all you need to know. For every 0.2 seconds an enemy has been frozen, the enemy gains 1 stack of Arctic. And after losing freeze, the Arctic disappears. 15% additional damage for every stack of Arctic. So it basically goes from, I don't know, with normal freeze duration from like 0% more damage up to like 300% more. And with enough freeze duration, this can go completely crazy. So this is absolutely mandatory against single targets. Now, one of the reasons Frostbitten Gemma is actually so strong is because of the talents. You might think, oh, there's a few more multipliers. That's cute, right? But the big payoff comes in the form of Arcanist. So there's two talents here. The first one is Frostbitten. 90% more damage against frozen enemies, which doesn't sound too great on most characters. It's kind of conditional, right? It will probably come out to like 20-30% more damage consistent. But on this character, it is actually just crazy. It's almost always up. So Frostbitten is a huge payoff for the freeze. And then as well as that extreme coldness. Freeze gains an additional effect. Whenever you see gains an additional effect, that means it scales with freeze effect. Every 0.1 second, -7 cold rest. This stacks up to 20 times. This gets amplified by freeze effect. So we're at like -10. So at full stacks, this gives the enemy -200 cold rest, which basically means we don't need any pen at all. They're just extremely low. These two talents alone will round about triple 2 times 4 your damage. That is one of the reasons why this character is so good. As well as that, though, we're also using this little buddy here. Additional damage against frozen enemies. You can get that on both of your weapons. And this goes up to, like, I think over 100. So, yeah, it's just... you get a ton of multipliers that you shouldn't usually have. Now, I'll quickly show you a map right here. This is a tier 8 with, I think, yeah, fully amped up. So basically, what you're going to do is you will sometimes press your lightning beams. This is not meant to, like, you are going to lightning beam enemies. It's all about these thingies that are going to kill stuff for you. So you basically move, press it once, and then your spell burst is going to recover. Spell burst is basically like Unleash, if you don't know, and you're just going to move around like this. You don't even have to hit an enemy. They just spawn, right? So all you do is that. Then you have your forced start on rhythm, which basically makes it so it gets auto-cast. This basically just gives you extra energy shield. Early, you will be life-based. It is what it is. You're going to be a little bit squishy, but later, once you have the gear, definitely go for energy shield. Mana Boil will just give you more damage at the cost of mana regen, and then Fixate is against bosses. Now, in terms of movement skill, I'm using Spiral Strike, but you can definitely use something else if you wanna. This is the only reason I'm using Sacrificial Daggers, because otherwise you can't use it. If you're fine with a normal teleport, wands are incredible. So with wands, I would probably do double the damage I currently do. But I just really like being able to whirl around and be a little bit faster. So you can kind of pre-stack, and as you can see right here, everything is kind of gonna start to explode. Let's do the Nightmare mechanic right here. Real quickly. Yep, sure, whatever. All right, let's start. So you're basically just going to move around. Now, sometimes you will see that we do like no damage, and then all of a sudden we're like one-shotting everything. And that is because there is a sort of like a waiting period sometimes on the freeze. It shouldn't be because it's instant, but it doesn't always work perfectly. So there's like a slight delay on the damage. So if you're playing the build and you're like, oh, I do no damage, just wait until they're frozen. You probably don't have optimal gear right now. We're going to talk about hero memories later and how to easier freeze enemies. But yeah, if they don't get hit by your cold pulse, they're most likely not going to be frozen because, yeah, you would have to wait for your Frostbite stacks. In case you don't know, Frostbite also applies passively, but yeah, it's a little bit unreliable and kind of slow. You don't want to wait like 7 seconds until enemies are frozen. So as you can see right here, once the freeze is up, the damage is going ballistic. Yeah, this should be a playstyle. Tap, go, tap, go. Obviously, if you're Ring of Ice, you actually have to cast yourself, but yeah, that's another story. But with that out of the way, let's talk about skills. So our Lightning Beam is supported by added lightning damage. Psychic Burst, this basically just plays into Spell Burst, which, yeah, once again, is very strong. Then what I have here is Overload as well. This is my last support. This one basically just gives us more damage per Focus Blessing. Normally, you're going to have around about 5. I have, I think, 7. So it's just a really good more multiplier. And then I have 2 supports that are very specialized for Lightning Beam. So if you're doing a different skill, then forget these exist. Scattershot Beam gives you +2 additional beams, which means I can have 2 more of my buddies down, and it gives a little bit more damage. Refracted Prism makes it so you have 10% less beam length. Beam length for the skill actually affects only AoE, so it's kind of like 10% less AoE, but we make that up somewhere else. And it gives us 25% more damage and 2 additional refractions. This is basically like chain for beams. This is for clear only, and if you want, you can sub it out against bosses, but a normal more multiplier is only like, I don't know, 8-9% more damage, so whatever you want. Then Force Start. If you're still life-based, you don't have to do this, but Force Start is going to be incredible once you're energy shield-based. This basically forces your energy shield to start whenever it activates, and you get energy shield recharge. The thing right here is you can have defense layers. When using supported skill, energy shield cannot be interrupted by damage for 2 seconds, which means you're going to keep regenning even though enemies hit you. After that, we have Rhythm, which just means it auto-casts the skill. You can also press it yourself. It has a cooldown of around about 5 seconds. This only does it every 6.3 seconds. It's not perfect, but one button less to press is definitely worth it for me. Increased duration and then cooldown reduction just to have it up more often. Spiral Strike, this is something that I'm doing because I have decent gear now. Is basically I'm sacrificing damage for being able to spiral strike around. I just really like it. So here I go. Quick mobility, which gives me extra attack and cast speed. Cost conversion, which if you don't have any mana problems, you should definitely go for periodic burst. This gives you even more attack and cast speed, so it makes it even faster. But that's what I do. Also, using Spiral Strike gives me Hardened, which means I actually take less damage, 25% less damage. So yeah, pretty good, but your most likely replacement for most people, if you're struggling with damage, would be go for Wands and then go Frigid Transmission. Then you're just going to have kind of like a blink, but yeah, whatever you want. That is definitely something you should probably do because, yeah, Wands are OP. They do a lot of damage. Okay. Mana Boil is next. This basically just degens your mana, and for that you get more spell damage. That's all it is. And you're affecting it with a lot of supports that give you extra aura effect. Then we have Fixate, which makes it so enemies are marked, which means they take a lot more critical damage. And that's about it. A little bit more double damage. This is basically your button that you press on single target. Now, as for auras, we're actually reserving almost all of our life, as you can see right here, and almost all of our mana. If you're life-based, you cannot do that yet. So just, you know, the weakest aura that you can cut is Elemental Amplification. I think everything else will be fine. Because if you're not Energy Shield-based, you don't have Energy Fortress anyways. So these two only use if you're already Energy Shield. This gives you more LE damage. This gives you more Energy Shield, more damage. Restraint. Now, to fit in all your auras, you will need these. These are, I think, 100 FE or something right now. It's basically like Enlighten in Path of Exile. Makes it so they reserve less. Precise Ice Imbue, this is crazy. This is nothing like Herald of Ice in PoE. This is way, way better because it's actually a percentage explodey and one of the reasons why we're clearing so fast. Complete no-brainer, insane. The Precise version only costs like 3 FE, so definitely pick that up ASAP. LE Res, if you don't have any res problems, then kudos. You don't need this, but it's kind of nice to have. Magical Source basically fixes all my mana regen problems, so if you're like, I don't know how to regen, just level this up. It's crazy good. And this we have on Seal Conversion, so this deducts from our life. It reserves from our life, and we still have another Restraint. And then our last setup here is Summon Flame Spirit. On this one, I actually don't need the Restraint. I just leveled it because it's kind of good money. I would still be able to reserve it even without this. But what this does is it gives us flat critical strike. It's basically like a golem that follows us around. It gives us flat crit. So plus 150 crit rating means your base crit goes from 5% to 6.5%. And that gets increased by superpower. What this does is basically it removes the minion and just gives you the buff, which means it can't die anymore. You always have the buff and you get increased effect. Then for hero memories and relics, there is a lot of good ones right here. So after freeze ends, Frostbite and Frostbite rating will no longer be removed. Now, obviously, this is not necessary if you are Frigid Infusion, but I still find it nice while mapping in general. So this is something you will have to test out. I'm not 100% sure what's the best setup in terms of Frozen Heart. I do know that you, on your memory, you definitely want this mod right here. Cold Pulse inflicts Frostbite on target with 15 Frostbite rating. So on top of the 20 it already does, it does even more. And that scales with increased Frostbite applied. So you can have almost perma-freeze, but I don't have that. I'm not anywhere near that, just so you know. So maybe you can see on hero rankings, maybe some other people have a good setup. This goes up to 16. This roll really, really matters. GG second mod would either be more damage against frozen enemies or something like additional Frostbite applied. But yeah, here, more damage against frozen. That's about it. Important on your relic is if you are going to go lightning based, you have to have your Engram 2 open. So you can put Ice Surge Undercurrent here. I already talked about this. If you're lightning based, this basically allows you to do so, right? Otherwise, you don't need this at all. It's a very cheap one. And this one, Complete Novelty, I actually kind of regret busting 2000 FE for this. It was a good investment overall, but I could have, like, I don't know. If I improved all my gear, I would do, like, double or triple the damage. Whatever. This makes it so I can use both of these hero traits and I don't have to swap around while bossing. It's nice while mapping. Then as for items, Basically just energy shield anywhere, as much energy shield, and you're going to have to fix your resistances. So res. A very important thing, especially this league, is get your erosion resistance up. I guess you can't fully see. Erosion res right here. Super important for the league mechanic. It is crazy how strong the league mechanic is and how much erosion damage it deals. When I went from 0 to 62%, it blew my mind. You have to get it everywhere you can. So you will see that basically everywhere right here. The chest is a big deal in terms of energy shield. As you can see right here, I get 1,000, which gets scaled by all my multipliers. Crit strike rating, whatever. Cast speed, whatever you can get here. Aura effect would be GG. Then my necklace, I have +2 to active skill level, which is very strong. +1 to max spell burst would be quite good as well. If you have beacon right here, which is the elevated version of, I'm going to talk about that in the skill section actually. But if you have beacon, that is GG, just so you know. That it's a prefix. Yeah, just more res, stuff like that. Gloves, more energy shield. Fervor is incredible. So this basically, at full stacks, gives you 200% increased crit chance. Additional beam length, complete overkill, in my opinion. I don't think I would do this again, but it is more AoE, basically. The best thing here would be extra frostbite applied. That gives you extra uptime on your freeze. But yeah, in general, otherwise, erosion res. My gear is pretty crappy, as you can see. I don't have 6 stat gear anywhere near. The movement speed is actually useless on this build because I haven't gone castwell channeling yet. If you don't know, precise castwell channeling costs like 1,000 FE right now. So yeah, I kind of made it for that. But movement speed, if you're whirling around, completely useless. However, if you are blinking, it's very, very good. The most important stat on your boots. I mean, you're probably an ARPG player, so you know what's up with that, right? So polygonal enclosure, this is only necessary if you are this skill, the lightning beam. It gives you +2 beams, and then also this is supposed to be a downside, but if you corrupt it, it's actually an upside. So usually this gives you 20% less AoE, and this gives you 20% more. Yeah, so something like this would be optimal, right? +3 skill, additional damage against frozen enemies, cast speed, additional damage to spell burst. This would be, I mean, double or triple damage right now. I'm prepping for my next build, but either way, all you need here is as much damage against frozen enemies as possible, and then increased damage, crit damage, all of that good jazz, and we're dual wielding. In terms of passives, we're Goddess of Knowledge, Magister, and Arcanist. So yeah, pretty cookie cutter build right here. We have +max to Focus Blessing, +2 spell skill level. We actually can't take the spell burst charge speed because we just don't have the resources right now, but everything is pretty normal. As for talents, +3 maximum spell burst is incredible. So if you have beacon on your amulet or your slates, what you can do is you can actually go for winter. Deals additional damage to an enemy for every 2 points of frostbite rating the enemy has. This is completely ridiculous against bosses, because if you swap to this, your enemy will always have like 150 to 200 frostbite rating, which means you get like 70 to 100% more damage. It is, I mean, it's crazy, but yeah, I can't afford it right now. Just so you know, something to look out for sure. As a second talent, we're using Preparation, which just gives us extra Focus Blessings, and then it gives us 25% additional cast speed at max Focus Blessings as well. This does actually work with Spell Burst, because in Magister, they changed Play Safe. So Play Safe means that all the increases and reductions to cast speed is also applied to Spell Burst speed, but it's now also applied to additional. So it's also applied to more multipliers. That is why this is so cracked. As for Magister, pretty straightforward. Super important is to get the +1 max Spell Burst. Everything else, pretty damn cookie cutter. And the first talent you take is Bunch. It's not great, but it gives you +1 Focus Blessings and a little bit more damage. If you energy shield base, do not go Shell, because it actually screws with your life reservation, because it sets it to 100. But yeah, whatever you want, you can do it as well. Arcanist is your biggest power spike, but it comes at the end once your spell burst is set up. So if your character doesn't feel that strong, this second thing here will be around about at level 84, 85. You will get this, and it will like more than double your damage. Just so you're aware, if you are leveling, you're like level 60 and you don't even have Frostbitten yet, you will do like 1/5 of your damage. Just so you know, it's crazy power spike. It's still strong while leveling, but I'm just telling you right now. So we're basically just pathing up. Really important is the energy shield charge speed and energy shield regain. Regain is kind of like leech, but worse, but it's still good enough. We're just going through crit, attack, and cast speed. Down here, you want to take all the freeze duration. This is completely busted. And then with the right hero memories, you also want the Frostbite Inflicted. However, if you don't have perma uptime anyways, you don't have to take it. You can also go for other stuff like AoE maybe if you want to. And then these 4 points are going to be super vital to actually reserve all your auras. Now then, down here, Statue of the New God. As for slates, all I have here is just normal slates. I don't have much invested. I crafted all of these on my own. Extra focus blessings is good. Attack and cast speed, damage, you know the drill. Early res. +1, right? Either +1 spell or +1 lightning, or if you're Ring of Ice, +1 cold, obviously. Spell burst, charge speed, and then also immediately starts energy shield charge. Now, one important thing to know about this is you really want to get that on a slate, otherwise you will have to take it right here. And while these nodes are not bad, you just do not have the points. I'm at level 96 and I'm telling you, it is very starved. So yeah, otherwise you can just take it on the tree, but I would highly recommend to get this on a slate. Immediately start energy shield charge upon entering low energy shield status. And if you can, also the +1 maximum spell burst is very nice. At this point, I also have to warn you, if you're missing damage and you just have shitty slates here, the difference between me having on slates and not having on slates is like 1 billion damage. Roundabout. I do 1.7 bill. Without it, I do 0.7. So more than double. So just realize that if you don't do slates, that's why you do no damage. As for leveling, if you guys don't know, Maxroll has all the leveling guides that you need. You can just go up here. I'll link this down in the description. Go to class, whatever class you want. In this case, we go Gemma, and then we're Frostbitten Heart, and this is going to be the guide that I'm going to link to you. This is basically what I followed. I had a few changes, but they're barely noticeable. You basically level with Ring of Ice, and you can stay Ring of Ice if you want to, just so you're clear. This is why I said this over and over in this video. I just wanted to play the new skill, right? Everything you need is right here. And yeah, it's going to be quite fun. One important thing to note that I changed from this guide is I'm using Ice Imbue, which I don't know why that's not in the guide, I'm going to be honest. But Ice Imbue is an absolute no-brainer. Also, while leveling, this gives you Explodey at, I don't know what it is, level 30 or something. It's incredible. It is a must-have, so definitely add that in. Now, in order to get the right Gemma, you have to use the second one right here. If you go to Gemma, it's the second symbol. Now, if you do not have hero tokens, she costs 100 hero tokens, which you can farm up. But if it's your first time, you will either have to pay or have to play a different character. I will link to Maxroll guides down below in the description. There's a lot of awesome free-to-play characters, just so you know. Now, this will look something like this if it's locked. So this is basically, I can't click on this right now, and it's basically going to either prompt me to go to the shop. If I go next, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I have 100 hero tokens, so I could actually purchase her. But if you don't, you have to pay, I think it's like $10. But yeah, that's about it. I've really been enjoying this league mechanic. My next video will be all about it, how to make currency with it. I'm really digging this. There's so many quality of life improvements. It is currently my number 2 ARPG behind PoE. It is such a pleasure to coming back to this game every single time. And when it comes to how many quality of life improvements this game has had over the last year and a half, I'm just absolutely baffled. It is very proactive with its improvements, so I'm very happy about that, and the devs have been doing a fantastic job. But yeah, with that said, if you're struggling on currency videos coming out soon, and hope you enjoy the build if you pick it up, whatever skill you use. And with that said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.